at the mill in the Sawyer's room. And this is being recorded on Zoom and will be later published to our YouTube channel. And with that, I will hand the agenda over to Council President Peter Shea.
Thank you. Just, I guess for the record, Angie will not be participating tonight and
I just got a text from Marcus saying he will not make it.
oh, okay. And Kim is online.
Correct.
Good. Okay, great. Well, let's get started with fireworks research. Chief Bezizos.
Thank you. That was perfect timing.
Your voice changed.
Yeah. Amazing how that happens with AI. Caitlin, are we ready? All right. So thank you, Council President and Council. We came to you with some research that you asked us to do during the council retreat. Sorry for the multiple pages, but I wanted to make sure you do have all the information. In working through with the staff is looking at the different cities and what is going on around the county and where the fireworks are banned and where they're not banned. Unfortunately, we missed some information. My predecessor next to me here was helping me work with the parks and where it was at and which cities and stuff. I thought her marking was already done and come to find out it's not quite done. So some of those cities that don't allow fireworks is like Linwood, but it says it's marked that they do. So I apologize for that. But as we go through this, we'll give you some research and some links to look at on the county website and stuff. Some of the requests that we did, we looked at our fireworks in the city parks. So under chapter 10.03.100, we want to include that there's no fireworks at all for possession or discharge allowed in the city parks unless permitted by the director, because they do host events out on the lake and in the city to do a fireworks show during Aquafest and maybe other events. So we just want to make sure that there is no possession of any fireworks allowed in the parks. Second, we want to look at fireworks on city property. We're building the new civic campus and we have the public works property. Looking at to exclude firework possession or discharge allowed on any of the city property, except for the police department, because we have destruction, storage, and evidence that we have to deal with fireworks. The third thing looking at it is definition of consumer fireworks, updating that. In the city of Bothell, they actually list out certain types of fireworks that are allowed in the city, which I really like because they're very specific. As we get into that, I will show you their ordinance and work through that with you to give you some ideas instead of just saying all consumer fireworks, because there is some consumer fireworks that are legal that can come off the reservation. A lot of consumer fireworks that come off the reservation are not legal because of the poundage and stuff like that. So it's very hard to decipher what ones are legal and which ones are not. And then we need to look at the updating 9.64 to 0.60. Right now, it is a misdemeanor to possess fireworks in our city. But a lot of cities have moved to a civil penalty. I know Marysville has a $250 penalty, and a second offense is $500, and a third offense is a misdemeanor within 5 years. With that, we only get 30% of that for the funds from the ticket, and 70% goes back to the state for every ticket that we write. So the city has to pay court fees and all that stuff out of that 30%. So we really don't get a lot of money from a ticket if we write it. And then I gave you some data for approximate cost of an emphasis patrol. We are currently under collective bargaining with the guild. So this is subject to change, but this is an example of 2 officers in two cars going around and patrolling. So that 2 officers in 1 car would be about $4,320 just to be around doing a fireworks emphasis patrol during a 6-hour emphasis. So just stuff to think about as you're wanting, what kind of enforcement, how are we going to put out overtime to be able to deal with that, because the officers on regular duties are handling other more serious crimes than just fireworks. If we go to the Bothell, this is one of the things I was going to show you in the Bothell fireworks. I had it and then it bumped up, sorry, what they outlined for possession. So in theirs, they say the following consumer fireworks may be possessed or discharged within the city only during the time periods described in the ordinance. Sparklers and tanks, snakes, party poppers, snappers, and novelty smoke devices. I talked to the chief down at Bothell, and he says they made this ruling a couple of years ago, and now they're gonna may go back to expand it just a little bit for more for some consumer fireworks, but they put in there the specific fireworks that are allowed to be discharged during that period of time. Which would make it easier to enforce. And then there's some information in there for future education. You'll see in your packet dealing with a fire marshal and the kind of different community events and stuff like that, community education, what fireworks are legal, what fireworks aren't illegal, you know, when they can be fired off, how the process works, the handle with care, the restrictions and stuff like that. So there's a bunch of media releases in there too. And then talking about transporting there's different poundages of fireworks that can be transported in a vehicle, but there's certain things, if it's got an igniter, those kinds of things. And we know with people buying fireworks, they just don't buy the consumer grade, put them in a bag and just individually, you know, have each bag filled with specific fireworks. They mix them all together. And that's where we start coming up with issues and problems. So those are the things we'd have to do. We'd have to educate our officers on which ones would be legal and then how to properly, you know, take those into possession and transport them and then dispose of them. And then it talks about when the bomb squad would want to come out and be able to have to deal with them. Those are the M80s and those big fireworks that people do not want to put in patrol cars because of the static and the radios and stuff like that could ignite those. I know that's a lot of information in there. Each city is broken down. Caitlin did a great job of putting in the cities and their enforcements and the notes from the enforcement, what each city does. So hopefully that gives you some more information regarding what they do, how do they handle it during the times that allowed, and then what their charges are for possession of it. A lot of them just follow into the RCW, but some of them do have an ordinance that has infractions. Everett example is an infraction 500 for the first offense. Second offense is then 5 years is a misdemeanor for $1,000. With that, do you guys have any questions? I know one of the things that code enforcement wanted to make sure is that we don't do it towards code enforcement through administrative process, that we actually change it to a civil penalty. And we've talked to Greg about that and how that would work. So we'd have to change the RCW. I think it's for the 10 code, right? It goes back to Russ. Yeah, the 10 code applies back to the administrative process through code enforcement, 9 and 10. Yeah.
So yes, I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
You mentioned that Bothell has gone back and they're looking at potentially expanding the exceptions. I'm looking at it's page 24 of our packet, so 837-105. Do you have any idea what additions they're going to make to this list? Because I really like this format. To me, this strikes the balance that I personally would like to see of, you know, trying to crack down on this problem and control it, but still leaving some room for people to celebrate. As I mentioned before, you know, we had that vote and the result was people seem to be in favor of celebrating with fireworks. My concern looking at the list as written is if I go to page, I believe it's 59, and I'm looking at legal fireworks versus illegal. As far as I can tell, there's only really 2 categories out of all the ones listed on page 59 that fall under the exceptions Bothell has left in. So I'm wondering if there's any way we can expand that section, you know, for something in our city, while also appreciating that the officers have to be able to quickly visually distinguish between what's allowed and what's not.
Right. And I don't know what Bothell is going to expand to. He just had mentioned that they're going to maybe expand that a little bit, but he did not say which fireworks. And that page 59 does show you the legal consumer fireworks that are allowed to be sold. So you can actually add to it and decide which ones you'd like to do.
So for example, growing up in Idaho, so if you looked at that page of these legal fireworks, you would be able to do anything that didn't leave the ground. right? So like the cone fountains would be yes, the wheels would be yes, the sparklers would be yes, the novelties would be yes, the smoke devices would be yes, and the ground spinners would be yes,
The reloadable.
because
motors.
they don't leave the ground.
Yeah, and something along those lines, because as far as, and again, I was just looking at these really quick. It looks like Bothel's left in essentially the sparkler category and the novelty category, and maybe the ground spinners. I mean, they have tanks in there. But it seems like everything else would be restricted under their ordinance. And so if we can come up with a workable solution for our city that maybe includes a little bit more here, but also again makes it palatable for the officers to enforce it, I think that would be something worth looking at.
Chief, I appreciate you clarifying the matrix that was missing some information and so forth. That was a little puzzling as to.
Yeah, sorry about
why we're
that.
Looking at that. Just another point of clarification, the Marysville ordinance is not the correct most recent ordinance. It's actually ordinance 3014. So if maybe we could insert that into the packet for the folks that aren't here tonight.
I think there is an ordinance. Let me see. We actually scanned what they had. Let's see here.
Yeah, the ordinance that's in here, 2409, is from 2002, I think, and they've since updated. Specifically Marysville is what I'm referring to.
Yeah, I gotta look and see which one ended up in the packet.
What ordinance number did you say was the current one? I just want to note it. What was it?
3014 is their current fireworks code.
She put the links on the top of Marysville's thing. So did we get the wrong link maybe? Or is the link right in the packet information? Let's see, go back a minute. I'm trying to get up in
That I can't
Marysville.
answer.
There's so
I
much
just
stuff here.
Printed off what was. on
Yeah,
it.
Marysville under page 7. There's a link at the bottom there on page 7. That's 22.
Yeah, that's not 2409 is not the appropriate ordinance.
Yeah.
It's 3014.
Yeah, we'll update it for you. Sorry about that. I think that's the one we were working with the clerk's office. She was trying to pull some of the current stuff off the ordinances and stuff. I thought we ended up adding a packet to it because the commander went over and specifically talked about their enforcement and how they did it. I was trying to see what attachment did that one not get on there. Go ahead.
I would be happy to pull the correct one and double check our link and then also update the spreadsheet and send out the spreadsheet as is if you guys want to view the information across.
Yeah.
It was hard to insert such a large spreadsheet into the packet without it being teeny tiny. So we did some creative problem solving, but I would be more than happy to send all of that out to council tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
So the question that you brought up or a couple weeks back was this bomb disposal unit. It doesn't seem that that's a prevalent problem in these other cities. So there's actually some language, and I don't know which one it is, but they talk about when they call the bomb squad and when they don't. Everett just, I think, uses the fire department to round up the fireworks.
Everett, if they're small amounts, you take them down to a bin down at Public Works. If they're large amounts, then you would call the bomb disposal guys.
Right.
Yeah, there's a certain poundage is a cutoff. So, and they're depending on if they're illegal and they can ignite. So if they're like the mortars that you see on what Councilman Donahue talked about on page 59 on the second one, the launchers, those are the things you have to worry about, like the reloadable mortars you have to be careful with because it's got a fuse on the end of it. And with our radios and our static electricity in our patrol cars, we have to be very, very careful with that. So that's the stuff you got to be careful with. You look at the skyrockets, the missiles, even the firecrackers that people, those big packets of firecrackers that come all in a bin and, wrapped up and stuff. We have to be just very careful. And that's where we're going to bring in the bomb squad to be able to do some training and be able to say, which ones consumer ones can we transport without causing static electricity? And we have a bin at the PD now. We put that in when we did the remodel. So we have a place to store it. And then we'd have to call the bomb squad. But you'll see on page 60, those are the things that we're talking about, which are probably prevalent in most cities, are those kind of fireworks and stuff that we do see. So those are the ones we'd have to call immediately. It's just going to take a lot of training because I have a lot of brand new officers. Even my older officers don't have much experience with this, so.
There seems to be a prevalence in some of these cities too, that it's just unlawful to possess.
Yep.
So,
That's pretty common across the whole thing. There's not talking about discharges or, it's the
Right.
possession stuff, so.
Yeah, it's really the uncomplicated way to
right.
deal with it.
Yep.
So what's the next step?
I suppose we need a flavor from we need guidance from the council. Is it an all or nothing thing? Do we want to try to limit like Bothell? Like what's the guidance that we can turn around and put together a model ordinance?
So I think
Start
for
with-
me, I mean, I think what we decided at the retreat is that we're going to touch on city property and parks and things, and that was going to be our stop. I said, and then, I mean, giving more thought to, I think what Ryan was talking about as far as maybe coming up with a list of ones that are permissible. I don't know necessarily, I'm not, I do want to be respectful of the advisory vote that we had, a little over 2 years ago. So how we manage that, I don't know, but I think for the short term, I want to focus on making sure that we are making sure that our city property is taken care of. I mean, that was the concern, the primary concern. And then moving towards a more definitive solution, to the problem that we've been discussing I think would be good.
Well, and I think also part of that discussion was how do we get to a civil infraction rather than
Misdemeanor.
a misdemeanor type situation that's got to be prosecuted.
Correct. That's not going to happen.
What's not going to happen? The prosecution.
Prosecutions, I mean, they're not going to.
No, exactly. But I'm just saying, I think part of that discussion was more leaning towards the side of a civil infraction.
Yep.
Right?
You're correct.
Well, and the thinking there being that the civil infraction is easier to prosecute, so there's a higher likelihood of something actually moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But so the complication there that last time we talked about, so we ran to is there's the dual classification system. You've got consumer grade fireworks and you have the display ones, and that's covered by a state statute that supersedes anything we'll do. So we can't make everything a civil infraction. We can only do that with the consumer ones.
Right.
So that,
Well, the other ones are illegal, period.
right. And
So-
so there you're basically come back to,
Off the reservation.
yeah. So, but that would require the officers to go in and determine what type of firework they're dealing with. And as Chief has mentioned, once it's been fired off, it's kind of hard to collect evidence.
Well, again, I guess I don't know how these other jurisdictions do it. I mean, they obviously do something, so.
A lot of jurisdiction, to be honest with you, council member, is they don't do things with it. The only one that's going out and writing infractions right now is pretty much Everett and Marysville. They don't deal with it. And like we said, we had 16 infractions wrote last year to be able to do it. And I can't get I don't have the ticket numbers to find out the the dispositions on those. But a lot of agencies, even the chiefs have explained, they just don't have the time or resources to deal with it all.
Councilmember Shipman has her hand up.
Councilmember,
Oh, thank you. I just want to say, I think the list, I understand the want for it, but as I listen to people, to our citizens, they're very pro, we're very anti. I mean, they're pretty strong on each side. And the people that want us to have an outright ban, they're not worried about the ones that don't leave the ground. So in other words, I don't really think we need to make a list simply because anything that's legal, as long as it's on city property, is already legal. And haven't heard of anyone having a problem with those. But, I think focusing on keeping them off city property, again, it just seems like enforcing them, when I listen to the chief, is pretty near impossible. And I like the idea of adding 2 officers so they can patrol it and try and, keep it down and be visible to some extent. But 2 officers for a city our size that's a pretty huge undertaking. But I just want to say that I don't think there's a need to list sparklers and fountains and snakes and those things, just simply because nobody has a problem with those. I mean, they're not catching houses on fire. They're not keeping people up in the middle of the night. So I just wanted to say, I don't think we really need to spend the time with that language.
So as I read this, I mean, the list that I'm looking at is what is allowed. So I agree that those are the ones people don't have a problem with. It's everything but the list is prohibited. Is that what you're saying? Is we still want to allow those things, or you're saying?
Yeah, I'm
don't-
saying, let's still allow them, but I don't think we necessarily need to list them out. You know what I mean? People know what fireworks they get in the fireworks stands, here in town and the ones out at Boom City. I mean, we can list them, but those aren't the fireworks that are getting the police department calls, right? So it kind of seems like a gesture that doesn't really do anything, or maybe isn't even needed. And as far as handling, the M80s and the things that people are concerned about, it sounds like we're still struggling to find a solution to that.
Yeah, I think as I understand all of our discussion, the problem with that is simply they blow up, so you can't collect the evidence, and without the evidence, you can't prosecute it. And we've got limited resources for law enforcement prosecution, and fireworks are just not at the top of that list. And I mean, I think really the only long-term solution for that is more officers, which we've been trying to do for a while now. But I guess for me, I would like to see an approach like this as a good faith attempt, because I mean, I know I keep harping on it, but we had that advisory vote. I know there's conflicting feelings about that vote and what it means and how much it should weigh on our decision. But for me, that's kind of the default, is respecting that. If we tried this approach for a year or 2 and it didn't even make a dent in it, I would feel a lot better going back to the citizens saying, we tried, but it's just too big of a problem and we have to go the other way on this. That's where I'm at.
So what are thoughts on the legal ones that don't leave the ground?
So you're saying to list those as permitted and everything
Right.
else is illegal?
Yeah.
But yet, under state law, the ones that do leave the ground are legal.
Right, for example, the reloadable mortars,
Right,
they have it as legal.
right. So how do you split the hairs on that?
Well, so you split the hairs by saying, hey, in the city of Lake Stevens,
They're not legal.
you can have these legal ones as long as they don't leave the ground. So if I show up to your house and you've got some cones and some sparklers and some reloadables, I charge you for the reloadable mortars because they leave the ground.
So will they still be for sale in Lake Stevens in our fireworks stands? Are they for sale now in the fireworks stands? The
No.
reloadable ones?
You're saying
Or are
reload-
those only Boone City?
Yeah. Yeah, they would. I mean, we could add that as part of the code that they wouldn't be for sale.
So I thought about that, and my first reaction was to kick them out of the city. But then I realized anyone who wants fireworks, where are they going to go? And if they're already over at Boom City, I feel like we're just increasing the odds that they're going to pick up all the stuff they shouldn't have anyway while they're there. So in a way, I feel like maybe controlling what is available close by might almost do more for us than booting them out of the city altogether.
So requiring vendors to sell what only is legal in Lake Stevens.
Right. That way, anyone who just wants to pop down the street, they can buy what's legal or they can buy nothing at all.
Those aren't the problem fireworks, though.
Right.
I mean, we're
Right.
we're going around in circles all day long about talking about this. The problem is the illegal fireworks that come from Boom City. And plain and simple, they're illegal.
Yeah.
So I mean, as I understand it, Marysville actually uses we don't have the control of the fire department like Marysville does,
Right.
but they actually use fire personnel to help enforce their issues.
Yep.
If you talk to folks in Marysville, they will tell you there has been a noticeable decrease in the activity of fireworks throughout their city in the last 3 or 4 years. And they do write tickets. And it's, their concern was about their city properties and their damage that was doing. And they simply did a cost analysis and said, how much money are we spending picking up the messes and fixing the damages that are done by the illegal fireworks versus outright just banning them? I mean, it's costing them all this money to, I think they were upwards, I heard somewhere $70,000 to $80,000 a year in fixing things and cleaning things up afterwards. And so it just became a cost issue. And I guess I would maybe put that back in the discussion. What's it costing us? Damage wise. I know Sarah has said a couple of things that we've had damage. We've got issues of
Street sweep.
all sorts of chemicals, going in the storm drainage system. So I suppose Shannon can speak to that. And I mean, the core issue is the illegal fireworks. It's not the legal fireworks that is the issue. And I would also say an advisory vote is just that. It's to take a temperature. And if it was overwhelming, I would agree with you, but it wasn't overwhelming. And it's a non-binding vote. So we hear it from both sides. Folks, as Councilmember Shipman said, I mean, if you want fireworks, you're really in that camp. If you don't, you're really in that camp. So I don't know how to deal with it, but at the same time, we're making life difficult for our enforcement situation. It seems to me if, it's either legal or illegal. And if you're down to possession, that's the easiest test there is.
Right. Talking about that is like number one is just banning it from our parks, right? And right now we have only possession. We don't have discharge. And adding that to maybe that code to keep it out of the parks would help out because we can then ban all fireworks on that property, right? And then we can begin changing the code for city property and banning it there on those. Then it's just working with what is an infraction and what is a misdemeanor and how can we go down to that? And that gives you the city property. Then we have to deal with the public side of it. I know the schools have problems with theirs. They have it all shut off. People aren't allowed in there. So we get calls. They want us to trespass people from the schools. So we're running to schools. We're running to the parks. We're running to the public, plus answering all the other domestics and assaults and those things that DUIs that happen during the middle of the night. So last year we had 2 DUIs and assault weapons all during that night. But having possession and discharge in the park allows us not to allow anybody to be in there and we can keep them from going in the parks.
And that's where we need to start. And that's where the discussion was. And I'm going to push back on the advisory vote. One council position in 2021 won by 130 votes. 407 people supported Proposition 1 to ban fireworks. The governor's race in 2004 in Washington State, 129 votes out of 2.6 million cast. So elections do matter. And yes, it was advisory, but 4.64% is very significant in a race, especially when the 2016 presidential race was decided by 1.72%. So I think we need to be mindful and respectful of that and just say it wasn't that many people as a percentage. It was significant. Almost 10,000 people weighed in on the issue. Which was about 40% of the registered voters. So my focus, I would like to see to support the police with the city property and support the parks. We've done an outstanding job of developing our parks and we're continuing to do that. And I want to see the police and the Parks Department have the most support that they can have to protect those and our city property and going forward with our new city hall. To make sure that property is properly given the police the tools they need to be able to limit that. And I'm still struggling as far as managing the illegal ones, which is what people are focused on. There's not an easy solution. So, and, you know, I'm also struggling because our numbers, you know, last year's numbers are about half of what they were from 2 years before the police calls. And so here we are, the numbers are half of what they were 2 years ago. And now, you know, we're calling for a ban. When the numbers suggest that the problem is decreasing, you know, it could be apathy. People are saying, hey, I don't care. I'm not calling. But the data shows that we have about half as many calls we had in from 2021 to 2023.
And just to go on that, council member, it could be because we moved everything online to report fireworks. So a lot of people don't go online to report them now and don't call. I just want to put that data out there also, that they changed Snow 911 to change their way of intaking those calls because they were getting so inundated at 911 for those types of calls in the non-emergency line. They moved it over to reporting them online. And that was during that period of time.
So, can we say a first step is to just get rid of them on city property?
I was going to suggest, how about if we devise two ordinances, one that talks about possession and one that talks about what Councilmember Ewing and Donahue are, and let's have a public hearing on.
So one, no fireworks whatsoever, and two, one with
Right.
some caveats of tanks and
Stuff that doesn't leave the ground, like.
yeah, stuff that
Yeah.
doesn't leave the ground. Yes, no?
So
At least we'll have something to debate in
Yeah.
writing, I guess.
no, I'm all for that. And as I mentioned, there, Tree, I will never say no to public input. I welcome it. You know, just the thing that is kind of stuck in my mind. And I know if we talk about in terms of percentage, you know, it's four something percent on that vote. But when you break it down to the raw number, it was over 400 people. I look at that sign up there and it's kind of hard to read, but the max occupancy of this room, I think, is what, just under 300? I don't know if anyone just under 200. Yeah, you couldn't even fill this room with enough people to measure, you know, at the level we got from that vote. So I welcome public input, but you know, unless we've got people lined up out that door around the building.
So we can also run a Zen City survey on two different ones.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for more data. I will never say no to more data.
Does that make sense? Having,
Dueling
Rob, a second?
dueling ordinances.
yeah, I mean,
We can do it.
at least we'll get some, rather than just having some things here, thoughts and so forth, at least we can get things down to a point where we can have a discussion on simple points, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do an ordinance that's that is a fireworks non grata. And we'll do another one that is a fireworks non-leave the ground. And
So how do we go from like legal, so we go from
That was his idea.
illegal fireworks to now like we want to take another layer of legal fireworks and say it can't leave the ground. I mean, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I don't know how you get there. Like they're either legal. Why would we provide additional limitations on things that are legal? I guess that's, I mean,
so I
struggle with
think,
that.
I think if there's a concern about fireworks, it's the ones that are in the air that are landing on houses and that are that kids who aren't being supervised are putting their face over and catching a mortar in the face. And so when I think of safe fireworks, I think of ones that don't leave the ground because they're not as apt to hurt somebody or catch something on fire or maybe even be a public nuisance during non-4th of July times. That's just what I think of when I think of not leaving the ground. But you can still go out in the street with your kids and throw some, you know, sparkly fountains and enjoy the evening. That's just my personal reference on
And
I
the-
think
It's his idea.
it. Kim?
I was just gonna say, and this is kind of a side note as I was listening to y'all talk. So if someone, because I know we have some people in Lake Stevens that put on some pretty big shows. Can they be permitted? Like, so if someone wants to make that investment and put together a big fireworks show for their neighbors, is that something that Lake Stevens currently could permit? like through the permit process?
Not licensed, yeah.
It'd have to be a,
This is on their own private property that.
Yeah,
they're-
this would be on their own private property.
Sarah's shaking her head, yes.
Yes, through an event permit, there are different levels that we would allow, and then the fireworks portion would be another layer on top of that that would take a wider review. So I'm not going to say, no, it's not possible, but you can do private events. I've never been. opposed.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna permit those, we're gonna have to have.
Okay.
Unlike the homeowner who is maybe a little more
They're one of the,
careless, we're gonna have to have a number of, safety concerns and
Insurance.
distance from, I mean, otherwise we'll put ourselves into
it just opens a lot of,
a vulnerable situation that we don't want to be in.
So for now, all the big shows that we see going on around the lake do not legally have a permit. They're just an individual shooting off fireworks at their house.
yeah, they're
That-
extensions of Boom City.
And they're probably shooting off illegal fireworks.
And this essentially will become like a short-term rental deal where people don't want one next to their house. And so they're gonna want, we're gonna have a similar
Right.
issue, similar to that, as far as people
I
not
think-
wanting.
I think trying to permit them on private property really opens up. So because I can safely do it off my dock, I can get a permit, but because I can't safely go in the backyard of my 6 neighbors around me that are 10 feet apart from each other, I don't get a permit. Freedom. Yeah,
On page 15, there's actually a application must include the following, which include the state pyrotechnic operator license,
yeah.
as well as drawings and 500-foot radius and all sorts of
Stuff
things that would.
make that difficult.
Well, that's a public display permit.
Yeah.
So what I'm reading online through the state fire marshal office is that to get a license for displaying fireworks, you first have to get a license at the state level, and then they would come to the local level. That's where they would be looking at your firing zones and making sure they have all licenses. And then we would supplement that with any additional restrictions or things we're looking at.
Yeah, it's very regulated.
So I do want to make sure though that we're clear on the reality of this. And it's the whole point behind splitting them into 2 categories is we have control over one category and we can make it easier to prosecute that. Those are the consumer ones. The problem is that comes with tasking the police officers with making a distinction. If we blanket ban them, we either keep that separate classification and they still have to make that determination. I mean, I guess the easier part is they haven't been shot off, but they have to catch someone possessing them, and then they have to figure out what type of firework they're dealing with. If we lump it all under misdemeanor and we say fireworks, we match the state level one, we're back to how do we enforce this? Because then you're prosecuting a misdemeanor firework, and that's going to be low priority. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that distinction. It is more work, but the whole goal behind that was to at least tackle ones that we could control and could make easier to prosecute. Unless Greg tells me I got that completely wrong.
Well, let's get to some sort of guidance, because we've got 4 more heavy subjects.
I mean, I guess unless you wanted to add on to the 2 ordinance.
I'm just struggling with the whole discussion we had at El Paraiso and Monroe. The expectation was that the voters were going to say no, and we were going to honor that and just go ahead and ban fireworks. I mean, that was the tone of the conversation. So then when it came back, surprisingly, the voters want to keep them. All of a sudden now we're looking for ways to circumvent that discussion, that conversation. And I struggle with that because my intent, putting it to the voters, is respect that, and also respect that if there's issues, that data supports that there's problems, that we can look at something differently. But I struggle with that because I walked away from that. I fully expected there to be a no vote, and then it came back. I was very surprised. And I wasn't surprised that not even a year later, let's ban fireworks, it keeps coming up and, I don't want to put something to the voters, if we're not going to respect. I struggle with that. Same thing with the TBD. If we're going to vote for the TBD and we say, just kidding, I know you guys voted for it, but we really don't want it to pass. And then we go walk that back. That's not a good look for us as a city.
So I guess in the alternative to a complete ban, what would you like to see in a firework ordinance? Or not see?
I would like to see first what we've discussed and make the city parks and our property, maintain that. And then have some mechanism like to make a civil penalty for those that choose not to comply with existing law, and then provide I agree with the mayor's position, as far as the stuff going in the air. But I don't think the neighborhood people with the smaller ones, I think you're the ones who are like the one that Chief showed where they've got a garage full of stuff and they're doing like a mini display in a small neighborhood like Cavalier Ridge where the homes are 5 feet apart. So there is a balance. But the illegal ones, we need to find a way to be able to enforce that.
Circle is complete.
Right. You have any clear as mud guidance, Chief?
No.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. Let's come back with an ordinance that just specifically talks about parks and city property. And let's start there.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, first quarter planning, community development report, Russ Wright, Community Development Director.
All right, good evening, council, mayor. Just wanted to bring forward just what we've been working on for the last 3 months. Most of the information, well, all of the information's in your packet, and I'll just go over a few highlights. So from our long-range workload, we completed the code cleanup project. So thank you for that. That was a big piece of work. We are still waiting for the state patrol to return comments on the solicitor's license ordinance. We would really like to get that wrapped up before the season starts up again. And then all of our other code projects are on hold right now until we get through the comp plan. That's really our focus. We have completed an initial analysis of the housing and land use capacity for the city, trying to look at the new targets based on income levels and different types of housing. We are in the middle of working on our employment capacity. And then we have started the actual review and updates to the parks element, the public service element, and that includes things like the fire district, school district, sewer district, et cetera. And then starting to work on the natural resources element, and economic development element will be next. And then the other long-range project we've been working on is the community transit pilot project that's wanting to bring some different pilots into the city. And where they've landed is definitely still looking at this flex car and then potential of some sort of a ride share van. They're still, the board is going to make a recommendation on what elements will come into the city. And then as we shift gears and start talking about our permits, we've had 54 land use permits this first quarter, 244 building permits. Our inspectors have been extremely busy with over 1,700 inspections, and in code enforcement, 32 cases, 34 have been closed. And then we continue to make sure that our rights of way are clear of illegal signs, and 41 signs have been removed. And then at the end of the report, there's a list of several of the administrative tasks and process improvements and training, et cetera, that we've been working on. Are there any questions from the council this evening?
Yeah, I'm not understanding on what the Washington State Patrol has to do with our solicitor license code.
So the Washington State Patrol is in charge of doing the background and fingerprint review. And until we have a process to do that background check, we can't proceed with modifications, and they have very prescriptive language on what needs to be included in that part of the code.
I do have a question as far as the permits go. I'm seeing here the valuation of the permits is within 3%. The total fees are 20% higher. So help me understand I'm not understanding that. Page 83 of 114.
Yeah, on the exhibit.
Yes.
Can you restate your question?
So I'm seeing the total valuation from 2023 permits. That in 24 is roughly 3% higher.
Yeah.
But the total fees is roughly 20% higher. So I guess I'm assuming that there's not a correlation between the value of the permit. I know when you get a permit, it's based on your square footage or whatever that you're doing, and you're paying an amount based on that.
It is going to have several factors, and I don't know the specific answer to why this spits out the data the way it does between the two, but it is probably the valuation of the permits. I don't know if you'll recall last year when we talked about that we've had a lot of smaller permit types, water heaters and a lot of that. And that would be reflected in that overall smaller valuation in the first quarter of last year, where this year we've had more substantial square footage based permits that you're referring to, like single family building permits that would have elevated the amount received. So that's probably, and then with additional land use permits, that probably is what's reflective in the 20% fee increase, even though the valuation's a little different. So different metrics are coming in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Council.
All done, everybody? Okay. Barb, you're up next, 2024 budget amendment number 1.
Great. Caitlin, can you share my screen? Okay, let's get started. Get little feet running around.
Sorry.
Those little feet are loud. Okay, we are gonna go into our first amendment of the 2024 budget. I feel like I'm being upstaged. To do here. Okay, so all of this information is in your packet. I broke it down a little bit more for the presentation so I can hit you with specific portions of it and get through it a little easier. There are a lot of amendments during this first amendment. The biggest thing we look at is doing our beginning fund balances. So we look at last year's what we expected our ending balances to be to create our beginning balances, and then what actually happened. So this first screen shows what changes were actually being made in this budget amendment. So these are the changes to the beginning balance, resources, expenditures, and the ending fund balance. In future budget amendments, it won't be quite this many funds. This is nearly all the funds, with the exception of most of our debt service funds. Those don't really change much, but so you're going to see a lot of amendments coming forward in this one budget amendment. This is a summary of our budget amendment showing our beginning balances are going to increase by approximately $12 million. Resources are increasing by 23, and expenditures are increasing by nearly 40. The majority of those are capital projects. Looking at first revenues, much of the adjustment is to account for the debt proceeds, property sales, transfers, all the things to do with our civic campus and the museum. So all of that is getting budgeted here. Also, reappropriating the budget for the 24th, 91st project. We had anticipated that was going to be paid for last year, so we're rolling forward the budgets this year. And we have some revenues for those, including grant reimbursements, investment interest, and some retainage. And then there's some additional grant funding we're also bringing forward. Looking into the expenditure side, we are reappropriating and adjusting. A total of about 38.3 million is capital. So the majority is capital. Again, as I mentioned, museum, civic campus, 24th, 91st. Cedarwood Park, that's one that we're bringing forward expenditures and grant revenues, and Main Street project as well accounts for 3.6 million of the expenditures, and about 3.2 is revenue. So a lot of this has either corresponding revenues or is rolling forward. We are reappropriating some operating costs as well. So we're rolling forward about 860,000 in operating costs, and then we're adjusting some operating costs, so increasing budgets by about 790,000. A good portion of this is personnel related. So we had the Teamsters contract, and then also I will go over an L&I workers' comp increase as well. So a lot of different things in here. Okay, so on this one, I do break out throughout the presentation in these same columns. So we have the project column that's first, and this groups the amendments by either the project or the function. And then in the later slides, they're also color coded. Then we have the fund or the fund number columns, which shows which funds are being amended. And there's a number of projects in here that have multiple funds being amended. And then we have the total amended column. That's the one I'm going to be talking about the most, kind of going through. That is how much the current budget is changing. And then the column all the way over to the right, it shows column N, which is just my shorthand for notes, shows whether it's adjustments or roll forward. So adjustments are generally made to change the cost estimates, and then roll forwards, obviously we're reappropriating remaining budgets for continuing projects. So in this one, we show the majority of the first ones are operating cost or rate increases for the first few adjustments. That's the voter registration and some legal fees and some utilities. And then we have some roll forwards of some small amounts just of some operating and services. We see the Grimm House didn't actually have any budget in 2024, so we rolled forward what was remaining in 2023. So we have some as placeholders. And then the last one, the transfer out, we actually did decrease that as the transfer was made in the prior year. So we just wanted to make sure we had that accounted for. This is when we start grouping our amendments here. So the first portion we have stormwater fees, and I do have a better explanation down at the bottom of the page, or bottom of the slide, just kind of going into a little bit more information. So storm fees, these are on city-owned parcels, and we pay these internally. So we break down all of our city parcels by department or function, and then we charge that department for the stormwater fees and deposit it into our stormwater fund. This does actually decrease the overall fees. We had anticipated or estimated a certain dollar amount, and they actually came in less than we had budgeted. So this is actually decreasing our expenditure budget slightly. Looks like the computer, the next one is just grouped by computer department. There's a couple of them in here. One, the Wave Broadband, for some reason, there was no budget in that line item, and obviously there's budget needed. So just increasing that budget, there was an error to leave it out, and a couple small increases. The professional services budget and the capital computer, those are for things that were budgeted in the prior year and not fully paid for, including SharePoint, ViewWorks, and the data center hardware. And then we have the police related items, and this is reauthorizing the projects and purchases, some things that haven't been invoiced or were invoiced in 2024 for items in 2023. There's also the last 4 or 5 of them are for equipment or items that were not finished purchasing. So your vehicles, tasers, firearms, Those are rolling forward into the 2024 budget. It also includes the annual boat safety grant. We don't know exactly how much that's going to be every year, so we generally wait until we get it and then bring it forward in the budget amendment. And then also in here, we have the budget for the flock safety, which was previously approved by council. So this is adding it to the budget. Next, we have the Public Works. So we are adjusting revenues for sale of surplus equipment and adding the budget here for tree services. So previously, all the tree services were budgeted in the Parks Department, which didn't accurately reflect the actual usage. So we needed to add budget to the streets and stormwater for tree service as well. And then we're also rolling forward, again, capital equipment budgets. The next two are related to the Teamsters Collective Bargaining Agreement. The orange, the first section, that is for retro pay for the 2023. That equals approximately $179,000. And then the blue is the adjustment for the 2024 portion, which is $234,000. So those were approved by council. Next, we have a number of smaller things. The majority have some revenues and expenditure side. We have the opioid settlement, which council approved the most recent one last week or 2 weeks ago. No, last week. And so this brings forward the revenue budgets to date and then leaves a placeholder for expenditures. This is not budgeting the entire amount. This is just putting a placeholder. We can come back and add more to it later if council decides what to do with some money or has an idea. The WCIA, we're accounting for grant reimbursements. Training reimbursements. And then comp plan, rolling forward the remaining grant and expense budgets to complete the comprehensive plan. The purple, that one's really small. We're just rolling forward the remaining expense in the grant from the Office of Public Defense for the social worker grant. That one's in a kind of an odd line item in funds, so I just need to account for all of the dollars there. CJTC, this is Criminal Justice Training Center grants. You've got your wellness, your use of force, and then the most recent body worn camera. It says body work camera. It should say body worn camera records grant. One thing to note, we're not increasing the wage budgets for the body worn camera grant for that records position right now because we have current salary savings. We will be coming back once the guild agreement is settled, as we will need to increase wage budgets. And so we'll look at it as a whole at that point. And then the last one on this page is insurance recoveries. And this is just to account for the revenues we're getting from WCIA for the insurance recovery on some repairs that had to be done for a police vehicle. Now we get into liability insurance. This is actually a decrease from the budget estimate that we made. This is for all of our liability, vehicle, auto, all of our insurances from WCIA did decrease slightly from what we had estimated. We had estimated high, which is good and conservative on our part. So we did decrease at about $9,500 citywide. The next section is the other personnel related increase I had mentioned earlier. This is for L&I insurance or workers' comp. It's adjusting the workers' comp benefits due to an increase, a statewide increase of about 4.9% in that. And then also we had claim increases. So our actual experience claim went up as well. This accounted for $123,809 increase over all of our funds in our departments. So. Okay, so now we look at the capital. As I mentioned, there's about $38 million in capital. Most of these are roll forwards. There are some adjustments as well. The top few, these are just placeholders for project salaries and retainage. These are things that are required on each of our projects. And there's the retainage, there's a revenue in and an expenditure out. That's just to ensure that we are paying prevailing wage and holding retainage and that our contracts are paying. So The next one, we have the security cameras. We are rolling forward the remaining budget from 2023 into the citywide program. Public Works Shop, that as well. We're just rolling forward what's remaining. The 131st, there are some updated project costs on that one. And so we are utilizing some fee in lieu of mitigation dollars for that project. And I'm not sure how fast we're moving forward on this project. I know there's some discussion on it. So right now, we're just making sure we have the budget for it in place. And then Machias lift station, this is just reauthorizing the grant we have and then reallocating the funds from one capital project fund to a different one. Basically, we're emptying the capital facilities fund because we're going to utilize that for the civic campus and the museum, and we want to keep those funds separate. This entire slide is related to our civic campus. So this shows the commercial dollars. This is the rent receipts, the utility payments, repair and maintenance, all of the revenues and expenditures related to our new commercial properties. The CC bond that has to do with all of our debt service payments in our new LTGO bond fund. The purple is Civic Campus. So this accounts for all the bond proceeds, expected property sales, corresponding capital project expenses. So everything related to that. And then I broke out the museum portion, and that accounts for and reallocates the heritage grant and the property sale that we already have that we've been holding in one fund. We actually are moving it into this, as I mentioned, this facility capital fund for accounting. And then we have some park projects. We have Frontier Heights. We're rolling forward some budgets that we had in place. And then we're also increasing the budget based on some updated project estimates. We received some new estimates that increased the budget or the cost about $500,000. And so we know this is a high priority with all of the grants. We did reallocate funding between our different, as we call them, pots of money or different buckets of money in order to free up some real estate excise tax 2 funds for this project. So this should fully fund that project. We have the Cedarwood that accounts for the grants that we've received as well as the expenditures on that. And then the Bayview Connector Trail, this is the same as Frontier. We received new updated project estimates and then allocated some real estate excise tax 2 funding for that project as well in order to keep that moving. The next few are sidewalks. We have ADA. There was quite a bit of money left over in the budget from the prior year. We need to roll forward about $150,000 for outstanding invoices on that. And then we have the TBP 04 for the 117th. Again, we had some updates and increases in the project funds for that and for the TBP 02. What we did is we actually took quite a bit of funding that we had set aside in the TBP fund for some other projects, Main Street, a few others that we actually moved elsewhere so that we can really focus our funding on these sidewalk projects. And so this is allowing us to put more money into these and get these projects moving forward faster. So get those done. And then I think this is our last set of capital projects. 79th Avenue Access Road, we're just rolling forward the remaining budget, 24th and 91st. This is rolling forward the revenues we have as well as the anticipated traffic impact credit we have in there, as well as the expenditure sides of all of these. This does include finishing the project as well as payments to finish the roundabout. We are still getting some invoices for that as well. And this does have multiple funds, as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, some of the projects have a lot of funds. This one actually is in quite a few different funds. We did recently receive, and I know there's a, I don't normally talk about this fund, Fund 401, that is actually our sewer fund. We paid for the sewer, quite a bit of the sewer up in that 94th, 91st area. And so in the developer agreement, we actually get latecomer fees. And we received these fees from from Costco. And according to our auditors, we needed to utilize it in the sewer fund. So we're budgeting the receipt and the expenditure out of that fund. So just as an accounting purpose. The next two, we have 20th and Main. We are just reallocating some capital budget for that. That is the initial engineering. And then Main Street, this is reauthorizing and reallocating the budget and accounting for the additional grant we received. And then, as I mentioned, we reallocated some of the funding out of that TBP fund and into the TIZ, which is traffic mitigation. So just kind of move some money around so we could open up some additional restricted funding for what we needed for the sidewalks. This is just regarding the police record specialist. Council had authorized the records specialist that the grant is paying for I believe it was about 5 months of this. As I mentioned, we're not doing a budget amendment to add any expenditures, but we are adding the position to the organizational chart. So that's why we have this on here. And then a couple things that I spoke with the mayor about. I know we had received a request from the Volunteers of America. I believe it was for $65,000. That is not currently included in our budget. As you saw, the general fund ending balance did increase. I believe it was about I have it on here, $421,000 estimated ending. So there is funding there to do that if council wishes to do that. The one caution I have is that we are still waiting for the guild agreement, and we don't have a set dollar on what that is going to do to our overall budget for 2024. And my cautious recommendation would be to wait until we get through the guild agreement and then do that. But as I mentioned, it is not a huge dollar amount. And so if council wishes to do that, then I could add it to the budget amendment for next week. But that's all I have for this. Council has any questions
That's
or
all?
recommendations or I know.
Did you just say you could add the $65,000 to, but yet we won't have the answer from the guild in that time frame?
No, we will not.
Right.
That's correct.
But we do have quite a bit of increase in the investment revenue side.
We did. That was a large portion of our ability to have estimated ending increases. I believe our estimated or our interest was about 2.7 million overall through all of the funds. And normally the prior year, we got about 700,000 or 800,000. So it was quite a bit this year. And so that definitely is helping us with Teamsters and LNI and all these other things that we're dealing with, and definitely with the guild.
So concerning the Volunteers of America thing, that 65,000 is to be spent in Lake Stevens, correct?
Right. That goes right to Tina. And CRC and getting her some help. Awesome.
And if I remember correctly from the meeting, the past that was 50,000 and this request was increased to 65. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I believe was. It was $50,000 in the prior year out of the pandemic recovery or ARPA funds. That was part of that.
So it's just a matter of, do we put it in now, or do we wait till the second budget amendment and to see what the guild looks like?
I think we need to wait.
Okay,
Well,
where you at?
I say we do it now. I see the need there. I mean, they presented strong data as far as the number of families that are being served and the need that's there, and that money is going back to members of our community who are the most vulnerable. So I am most open, and I mean, I don't think you're going to find a finer person to run an organization of that type. And so like I have zero concerns about how that money is going to be administered. She's very thoughtful and diligent how she carries that out. So her and her team. So I would be supportive. I mean, I I want to be judicious, that's gonna be a big number coming from the guild. But I think we can make the numbers work.
I have a quick question because I'm sure I'm overlooking something simple. The 421, is that different than the first line on the second slide for
Yes.
general? Okay.
And I should have mentioned that. The second. Oh, went too far here. Oh, hi.
That's where the
Hi.
money went.
Hi, that's so sweet.
That's a
Hi,
nice
hang
looking,
on a second.
dog
Let
there.
me read. There you go. Okay, sorry, this one.
The
So
489.
this one that says 001 general, this is all of the general funds. So this is general operating, general reserve, the permit, the pandemic recovery, and the new fund that I created for tracking the commercial rents and leases and things. So I did go through, and so for reporting, budgeting purpose and for reporting purposes, general fund is one line, but in the background, I do break them out. And so it was about 421 just for the operating fund itself. Some of the other funds actually decreased a bit. But so the overall was 489, but the general operating itself was 421.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And
I had it in my notes, but I missed it.
do we have a time frame with the police guild? In other words, if we were to wait to make this decision, do we have a time frame on when we would then be able to give the Volunteers of America an answer?
I would say you're probably at least two weeks to
Okay.
4 weeks out.
So not too long then.
But you want to vote on this next week, right?
Yes,
And then the next budget amendment would be,
as soon as the guild agreement is done, we'll bring one forward.
When did we? Oh,
So you want to do this one and then the guild right
Mhm.
after that.
Yeah, we'll do this one and then generally we only do maybe 2-3 amendments a year, but with the guild one being what we are anticipating, we'll do that one. We'll just get it done and get the budget in. So it will be within a couple of weeks of the agreement being approved.
so we could bring a second amendment with the VOA on it in 5-6 weeks.
Mhm. And anything else that pops up too.
Any other questions, council members? Thank you, Barb. Appreciate that.
So is the is it consent that I'm going to not add it in right now and we'll wait until the next time?
That's,
Yeah.
I mean, did we hear anything from them? Why we?
I saw mostly
wait.
north-souths to that with one east-wester.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, move.
One vote.
Moving along, stormwater, Shannon?
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'm bringing to you the 2024 Stormwater Utility Rate Study. This is just an introduction to the study that we'll be conducting this year. We touched on it a little bit at the council retreat earlier this year when Barb brought to you different revenue sources. And so tonight we just want to discuss with you the approach that we plan to take as we evaluate our current stormwater utility fees and as we move forward and looking at future years and the rates. Let me just see if I. Okay. So I just want to talk about why are we even looking at the rates, give you a brief history for those of you that aren't familiar with how we got to the rates that we're at now. And talk about the level of services that we currently provide and what we propose as we move forward in evaluating and possibly updating the rates. Talk about an additional revenue source that the council may want to consider, which is a utility connection. And just look at some preliminary comparisons from other jurisdictions. So the stormwater utility fees, we're proposing to look at a rate study, and the rate study would take effect in 2025 and would be valid through 2027. The reason for only a 3-year time frame is Public Works is working right now to evaluate all of our stormwater conveyance system through the closed circuit TV inspections. And by allowing us this 3 years to actually do that full evaluation, we may want to reevaluate our rates once we come up and understand what the condition of our stormwater system is, if we need additional funding for capital projects or major repairs. Just some background, our current rates, there was a study done in 2018. This rate study looked at the way that we evaluate stormwater utility fees, and it also set the stormwater utility fee through the end of this year. The fee kind of method that we moved to is called an equivalent service unit. That equivalent service unit evaluates, essentially it gives kind of an average amount of impervious surface, and it applies that to a single family residential. And in the city of Lake Stevens, we evaluate one equivalent service unit is equivalent to 3,000 square feet of impervious surface. For all single family residentials and multifamily residential with 5 or fewer units, we charge 1 ESU. For other commercial or multifamily resident properties, we actually evaluate those properties based on total amount of impervious surface and then divide that by 3,000, which gives you the total number of ESUs. The rate is our set annual rate per ESU. So, for example, if you have a commercial facility that has 9,000 square feet of impervious surface, you would be paying 3 ESUs. So that's 3 times 265. Just to give you for some context, the total number of ESUs in the city is about 20,800 or so. And so that's where our total is. That also includes the ESUs that we essentially charge ourselves or our departments, as Barb mentioned in her previous presentation. So I just want to circle back on, in 2018, the city evaluated 4 levels of service. These levels of service took into account standard operating and a deficit for standard operations, additional stormwater facility maintenance to meet the NPDES requirements, high priority capital projects, and just medium priority capital projects. In 2018, the city adopted the level of service 3, which addressed fixing an operational deficit. It addressed the funds needed to meet facility maintenance for the NPDES requirements and high priority capital projects. Oops. We evaluated the capital project list that was included in that rate study, and the majority of the projects have either been completed or in the process of being completed. There's a couple here on this list that I just wasn't able to track down. I think that's the one on 20th Street Southeast and 79th. I believe that was completed with the 20th Street project. And then there's a couple other ones where different developments have come in and it kind of changed the plans for some of the capital projects. But the majority of the capital projects that we set out to complete in the 2018 study have either been completed or in the process. So when we look at the rate study here in 2024, and we look at these rates are going to set our utility fee for 25 through 27. We started to look at the levels of service, and I'm happy to kind of take any discussion at any time too, if there's questions. This is the proposed level of service that we've brought to you. Level of service 1 would essentially look at our existing rate structure and just factor in things like inflation, any new NPDES requirements that we're going to be held to. We have a new permit coming out this year, looking at our lake management costs and our infrastructure condition. And that's the work that we're doing right now with the CCTV and our stormwater conveyance system. Level of service 2 would be looking at private facility maintenance and what does that look like if we were to take over some private stormwater facility maintenance. Level of service 3 would look at high priority capital projects. This may be considered in conjunction with a utility connection if we decide to explore that more. And level of service for maybe an opportunity to look at property acquisition, and that property acquisition would be to support our capital projects related to stormwater or surface water or any kind of preservation of wetlands. This is primarily the information that I want to share with council tonight and open up for a discussion. I'll go into the types of data that we're going to look at for each of these, but just kind of be thinking about that. We really want to be able to scope the level of services so that we can pull the correct data and analyze it to bring back a set option of utility fees.
And
Rates,
you remind the council that happens next year, correct?
So
This-
we would look at it at this year and we would adopt the rates that would go into effect next year, but we would have to adopt them by August of this year.
No, I'm sorry. I probably misheard you. I was listening to scoping out the stormwater pipes to know our status.
Yeah, so we have a project going this year. We'll actually bring a contract to council next week for that to start with 14 miles. And then we have we've given kind of a preliminary notice that we are going to receive some grant funding next year to do it. And then we would follow up the year after to do it. So we anticipate probably 3 years to capture all of it.
Okay.
So when we look at these levels of services, originally in the 2018 study, level of service 2 built on 1 and 2, and level of service 3 built on 1, 2, and 3. We're just proposing a little bit different structure in that level of service 1 kind of becomes the baseline rate, and level of service 2, 3, and 4 could almost be considered independently. So for example, instead of them necessarily building on each other, we would evaluate a cost for level of service 1 and 2, or a level of service like 1 and 3, or 1 and 4, if you were wanting to, do level of service 3 without level of service 2, if that makes sense. And it will probably make sense when we have more data to show. We propose to keep the same ESU model. And right now, the administration of the fees and the management of the billing rates, we do work with Snohomish County to do that, and we're not proposing to change that at this time. So when we look at level of service 1, that's looking at our existing rate structure. And like I mentioned before, considering inflation, new NPDES permit requirements, lake management, and the infrastructure condition assessment, we would look at our NPDES requirements and what we would need to do for, and this will probably expand on sub-area basin planning. So more kind of long range planning as it relates to our NPDES requirements, continue with our lake management approach, and factor in stream water quality monitoring. We brought to you that presentation several weeks ago about our water quality health and the need to really evaluate our external loading sources. And that's where we would start looking at our streams and measuring different water quality parameters on streams to evaluate what our external loading sources are into the lake. And this would also look at our equipment, our stormwater equipment, such as our Vector sweeper and our fleet for stormwater. And then, as I mentioned, the maintenance, so just routine maintenance and the closed circuit TV. Level of service 2 would look at private facility maintenance. I think this is where staff really needs some guidance on what are we considering private facility maintenance? Are we going to focus on just residential or commercial? Our permit kind of has this caveat of we're actually required to inspect and try to bring private facilities into compliance if they were built in 2007 or newer. We've done an inspection of all of them to date, but it's kind of where we need to consider, do we go off of just what's in our permit compliance? Do we go off of all of them? Because typically it's the older ones that we start to see a lot of challenges with. And then do we kind of look at some sort of hybrid approach? We do have public right of way that drains into private facilities. And this is really, this is really common when we see a lot of other subdivisions, because subdivisions then construct new public roads, but they have to mitigate that stormwater impact. And so that water then is routed to their private stormwater facility. So they're managing some of the water that's coming from public roads. And then one thing to consider with this level of service too is what is the estimated upfront cost for repairs on some of these facilities that haven't been maintained possibly ever. The ongoing maintenance costs, so looking at staff and equipment. There's other jurisdictions sometimes do kind of a hybrid approach. They have more of a private facility maintenance grant program that they keep the maintenance requirements with the private entities, but they offer some sort of assistance, financial assistance to help them bring their stormwater facilities into compliance. That could be something that we consider as well, is possibly a hybrid approach. Really for this one though, for us to bring back some rates for our cost per ESU to be able to achieve this level of service, we need some guidance on what this is going to look like so that we're able to evaluate the correct data. Then level of service 3 would just be looking at our high priority capital projects. This would be looking at our 6-year CIP, any emerging projects that may come from our comprehensive plan update. And then level of service 4 is a potential property acquisition fund for capital projects or for regional stormwater facilities or for natural and wetland area preservation. I mentioned to you too a possibility of a utility connection. There's several other jurisdictions that do charge for the utility connection, much like water or sanitary sewer. It's a connection when you connect to the city's stormwater system. This is something that we currently don't do. You can see here that there's a variety of other jurisdictions that do it with ranging connection fees from less than 500 to 3,000. If this is something that council wants us to consider, then we can do some more research on it and come back with some maybe neighboring jurisdictions as well. This is just a comparison of ESU. I said 3,000 square feet is what defines our one ESU. And then this is just some other jurisdictions on how they define one ESU. We're not proposing changing this metric at this time, unless council wants us to look at that. And then right now, our stormwater utility fees are $265 annually. This graph here shows you where we fall with our neighboring jurisdictions as far as our rate, stormwater utility rate. So you can see there's a couple other jurisdictions that have a higher rate than us: Mukilteo, Stanwood, Edmonds, and Everett. I know Mukilteo just redid a rate study. And so I do have that information that I recently got that we would dig into a little bit. And then some of these other jurisdictions as well. So you can kind of see where we already fall. There's a couple credits that are available for stormwater utility fees. These are in our code, and the one here, the second one there, is administered by the county. The first one, we don't have any of these yet, or newer redevelopment commercial buildings that utilize a permissive rainwater harvesting system. We don't actually have any of those to consider. The third one there is a school district credit, and that's if they're able to prove that they're directly benefiting our NPDES requirements or our surface water. And this is something we explored with them, I think, when I first started in 2020, early 2021, and it's just something that we didn't move forward with, is providing a credit there. So we're not recommending any changes to the current credits that are available and outlined in our existing code. So as I mentioned, we're having this discussion today to help us kind of scope the level of service and give us direction on what types of data that we should be analyzing. We'll do the analysis in April through June, plan to come back to council with what does that data look like, and then leave time for some revisions. And then ultimately we would need to adopt the new rate structure in August. I know that there's usually like a council summer break in there too, so we would just need to be kind of strategic on when we bring this information back. So really what I'm looking for today is just a discussion on the level of service and some guidance on specifically level of service two, which is private facilities. And then any other considerations that the council may have that you want us to look into so that we can move forward with gathering the data and running the analysis. We also want some guidance if you want us to explore a utility connection fee and consider that as part of an option to help support the stormwater program. And then if there's any other steps or any other times that you want us to bring it back for discussion kind of in the middle, we're open to that as well. So.
Questions, council?
Yeah, got a few. So I see that our fees are among the highest. Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, I look at these other cities, they don't have a lake like we have, so I'm wondering what percentage of approximate, and you may not have the information, but of that is attributable to having, you know, our crown jewel and in our boundaries.
Yeah, one thing that I wasn't able to pull together before this is I started looking at all the other jurisdictions and I started looking at their stormwater system as well. How many catch basins do they have? How many miles of pipes? How many stormwater treatment facilities, detention facilities, of course, then the lake. So we can kind of get an understanding, you know, if one jurisdiction has 1,000 catch basins and we have almost 6,000, you know, we have a much higher maintenance standard than they may have. So I will pull that information so that it gives you a better comparison on the infrastructure that they need to maintain.
Yeah, it's just harder to compare like apples to apples,
Sure.
you know, when you have all the, like you're saying, they have just the different variables that are present that make it difficult to compare the rates. The other question I had with regard to the stormwater connection fees. So we already, the sewer district already charges a connection fee for that. So when I see sanitary sewer on here, how would do we double tap on that as far as charging, since the sewer district
We
is
would-
responsible for that?
So it's whenever there's a connection to our stormwater system, the sewer would be separate. So if you're connecting to sanitary sewer, you would pay a sewer connection fee if you are connecting to our city stormwater system. So for example, we have a development go in, they have their detention facility is then going to outfall to a city storm catch basin that then is part of our conveyance system. We would charge them a connection fee to connect to it. If we have somebody developing just a single family residential home and they're going to do their stormwater management on their site per the regulatory requirements, but then, you know, connect their overflow or something to our catch basin, we would charge them a connection fee.
And that would be similar to someone who transitions from a well to having a connection to city water. Is that also included in that for those people that are transitioning off of?
Yeah, that would be through, you know, PUD water is similar to if you're going to connect to a water, you know, water system, municipal water system, then you would pay that connection fee. It's essentially putting a connection fee that other utilities already have and putting it on stormwater.
Okay. So I'm guessing that because all these other, we have just like 10 or 12 here that show that they're charging, is it safe to assume that the other ones aren't listed, do not charge anything, as Marysville charges, looks like $50 or $100 based on the graph there. So
Yeah.
hundreds of cities in the state don't charge connection fee for stormwater.
So that probably requires a little bit more research on my end. I don't think that this is an all-inclusive list here. This was just an example that we were able to find without digging into all the other neighboring jurisdictions, but that's something that we will do if there's interest to bring it back.
I mean, if that's something we're going to consider, I just want to make sure that it's reasonably consistent with what other jurisdictions are doing.
Shannon, can you explore that a little bit more? I mean, I'm somewhat familiar with Marysville, and in the past, they have not charged a connection fee for storm drainage. They've charged an inspection fee for storm drainage when you turn a system over to the city, but it's not a per house connection like a capital facility charge for water sewer. So I guess I mean, when you start splitting hairs as to a person that's doing a little short plat and the storm drainage is being conveyed to a stream, do you charge for that? It doesn't go into the city system.
Mhm.
Storm drainage is typically the most expensive part of the plat that you're doing or development. So I guess I would say, you know, if you're paying a monthly charge or a yearly charge, excuse me, for your surface area, why would you charge somebody a connection fee to a storm drainage system? When the system is being constructed by that development?
Yeah, I can look into how other jurisdictions define it and bring that back.
Okay. And refresh my memory, are we, when a plat or a development is done, commercial properties separate, but when a development is done, are we accepting those systems as dedicated to the city, or are they remaining private?
They remain private.
So I guess.
Can I add one caveat to that?
Yeah,
They remain private, but we put a public easement over all of them that gives us access to do emergency.
yeah, emergency maintenance, right? So I-
Correct, and the language in our code is if we do the emergency maintenance, we have the opportunity to then bill
Yeah.
the homeowners association.
So I guess that even, I guess, further my reasoning for not charging a connection fee, if you're putting your storm drainage into your own private system, yes, it ultimately ends up in a city system at some point in time, but supposedly you're treating that water before it gets to the city system. Why would you have to pay a connection charge to the city for that purpose if you're essentially providing your own system?
Mhm.
I mean, that doesn't make, it doesn't
Yeah,
fall in the fairness test for me, I guess.
Well,
So maybe if the city had a regional stormwater facility.
Well, certainly you're buying capacity in there and you're not building a privatized system on your property for that. That makes sense. But I don't know as though we have done that.
Well, we proposed it a couple of times, it just hasn't been done.
I don't know as though we've done that.
No, I realize that, but the proposals have happened, so I can see it happening in the future.
Well, certainly, and then you would address that at that point.
But
Yeah.
I think, would we need to bring that up ahead of time so that it's already been discussed and put in there for those types only? As a, can be for only those types?
Well, I think that gets back to a basin-wide planning process as to, I mean, you're only going to install a region-wide detention facility to handle many properties, not one or two. And that would be analyzed on a regional basis, I guess. So the other thing I would say is, now you ruined my train of thought here. I'll get back to it in a second. Anyone else?
Yeah, and the level of service too, you said that the NPDES requirement was for facilities 2007 and newer, but we did all of them.
we inspected all of them just because we wanted to get a baseline information on which ones, we're trying to figure out which ones have HOAs, which ones don't. What's the condition of them, so we can look at how much would it cost to bring them up to current standards and then maintain them. When we did the full inspection of all of them, it was really for the purpose of looking at our utility fees. I know that the council we've been talking about this for a couple of years now. And we've kind of gone back and forth on it. So we just wanted to make sure we had all the information. We also have a requirement to map all private facilities that connect to the city's stormwater system. And so we needed to go out and verify all of our mapping anyways.
So did I understand you correctly when you kind of asked a question during your presentation of whether we wanted to add the ones prior to 2007 in the level of service?
Yeah, in the evaluation. Yeah, I mean, it's really, how do we want to evaluate private facility maintenance? It's my understanding that we would focus on residential and not commercial. But the challenge being is if we increase our ESU rate to serve residential stormwater facilities, it's those commercial facilities are paying multiple ESUs, but then they're not having the level of service. So that's just something to consider.
So Shannon, I know we've had, I guess I get your question answered.
Yeah, I was just gonna say on the acquisition piece of it in the level 4, I don't know as though I would favor that in a sense, just building a kitty for, or a fund for property that to be acquired at a later date. I would rather have that case be made to the council to see, just like we did with the property out on Grade, kind of a site specific deal to see if we got the money versus just kind of building something that would be there for that process. So I think a case by case basis would be more appropriate.
I'd support that.
That's my thoughts.
I'm supportive of that. So I do have a question about these private detention ponds. You guys had put a lot of effort documenting those. Have we gotten any traction as far as bringing those into compliance? Because I know part of the conversation of the storm fees was like, hey, are we going to target specific HOAs? You got 130 units and charge those 130 units instead of charging the entire city because of people who are not choosing to be in compliance.
So we have had success with bringing private stormwater facilities into compliance, primarily ones that have HOAs already because they have a governing body that's we're able to work with. We've had a couple successes with non-HOA private stormwater facilities, and that's been with the help of the conservation district. Is last year we did kind of like a on-site workshop. And so the conservation district had several people come out. We kind of helped the whole neighborhood actually maintain the stormwater facility. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I just want to know where we're at with that because I know there were quite a few units and there was a lot that didn't know they were in an HOA or the HOA disbanded or whatever. But protecting our water is really important because eventually most of the water is going to bigger bodies of water, including our lakes. So we want to make sure that water is as pure as it can be when it gets to its final resting place.
Yeah, I would say that's still a challenge. We're exploring different ways that we can try to communicate with homeowners. Right now, our method is, we send every individual homeowner a letter and it says you may own 1/40th of this detention facility and you're required to maintain it. And it hasn't been very effective.
So, but our options that we did previously discussed were you either take care of it on your own or we take care of it and then we assess and, whatever method it is to get remuneration for the cost of that.
Yeah, so to date, we have not gone in and maintained them and billed the individual homeowners.
So we've done that with code enforcement. We've had issues, extreme cases where people are not in compliance and we've gone in and taken care of that. And then so I would like to see more, whatever it is we can do to make sure that we can bring those into compliance and continue with that compliance, is just in my view, is going to benefit our overall stormwater quality.
Hey, Shannon, do you have a number on what the cost would be to bring any non-compliant private facilities up to compliance?
I don't.
Okay.
That can be part of our analysis. I mean, that's something that we'll need to factor into our rates if we're going to look at rates for the next 3 years, because there'll be some of an upfront cost. It's really comes down to, are we looking at all of them? Are we looking at just these ones from 2007 newer? I think I'm hearing that it's just, we're talking about residential facilities and not the commercial facilities.
Primarily residential, but I mean, you're the expert. I mean, I'm not a stormwater person, if it's 2007 or newer, I'm guessing that the technology is better 2007 and newer to, function more efficiently and, than the older ones, but whatever we can do to, one, have good stormwater. And so whatever your professional judgment is gonna be the best for our city is what I'd like to move forward with.
What kind of numbers would that be for? Is it 100 different systems prior to 2007 or is it 10?
Yeah, I think that's I think that's what I'm hearing is that we should come back to council and provide some of those metrics on what does it look like and what are the current condition of them. So that you have something, because you're right, you know, if it's one that's under, that's, okay, that's fine, but, what do those look like? And I don't have those tonight, I apologize, but I can bring that back, and I can bring that back sooner rather than later to help kind of scope what this level of service looks like before we dig into the analysis.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Without that data, I lean towards including them all. But the data might change my mind.
Okay. Anything else?
Is there anything else that the council wants us to look into or consider as part of these level of service options? I think I heard consensus that not to move forward with the level of service 4, but is there anything else?
Councilmember Shipman, any comments?
No, I'm just taking it all in.
All right, thank you.
And I guess for me, I really want to see, because we're at the very high end of the stormwater stuff. I mean, I do get comments on that. What's that go towards and whatever, and you know, I would like to be able to provide a better explanation when I'm asked that question. And I'd just be helpful.
We'll bring that back sooner. By the end of the month, probably, so that you have that information to consider.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. With that, I'll turn it back to the mayor for the next item on the agenda.
Great. So we're gonna move into an executive session. I think we're gonna go for 20 minutes and the discussion of potential litigation for RCW 42-3110, and there's no action expected after the session. Again? Yeah, let's start that in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Start the 20 minutes in 2 minutes. All right. All right, we are back and we